All right, I'm going to start the meeting. I can't bring the meeting formally to order because we are still missing a quorum, but I can make some introductory remarks. We have a full agenda, and I'd like to make sure that we get an opportunity to get through it and to get voices and comments onto the table as part of a working meeting of the community plan update for the university community. So I'll just start by welcoming everyone to University City High School. I hope you're enjoying being back here. We have the math monitor in the back there, and the superintendent will be coming around to check on your book bags before it's all over. So I'm Andy Weiss, and I'm a member of the University Community Planning Group. And George, I see we need another table up here. I don't know if anybody could help out with a table that would get more room for the subcommittee members. Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so I'm a member of the University Community Planning Group, and I am also chair of the subcommittee of the UCPG, which is responsible for hearing and providing public feedback into the City of San Diego's community plan update for the university community. I'm joined by Chris Nielsen here at my left, who's the chair of the UCPG, by members of the UC Update Subcommittee, as well as I wanted to recognize Senior Planner Nancy Graham in the back. Martin Flores from the Parks and Rec Department is there, who's worked on our parks portion of the parks plan and done great work. Michaela Volk is here from Mayor Todd Gloria's office, and I think we expect to have representatives from Council District 6, Kent Lee's office. They're here in a listening capacity. This is a working meeting of our subcommittee. So we're here tonight to hear and to discuss feedback related to the community discussion draft of the University Community Plan. And this draft was presented publicly last week at the University Community Planning Group meeting. And links to the plan, as well as to the presentation that was given to introduce the plan, were shared with tonight's agenda. And it is our expectation here at the front that the subcommittee members and participants have reviewed the draft and come with specific feedback related to particular elements of it. Tonight's conversation fits into a larger timeline. I can move to the timeline maybe. This committee has been at work for 4.5 years, over 40 meetings that began in January of 2019 through a pandemic and back out again. The goal for this work is to have a community plan that is ready for the City Council to vote on before the end of this year. And that would put us at 5 years in the making. This is the first of 3 meetings of this committee that are designed to hear and refine recommendations related to the community discussion draft, right? And to present those to the city so that they can work on that draft and make adjustments as necessary, and also to provide recommendations to the University Community Planning Group, which will vote on the plan and offer its recommendations to share with the City Planning Commission and the City of San Diego starting in July. Okay? So this is a working meeting. And the ideal of the meeting is to receive concrete feedback, to begin to condense that feedback as members of a subcommittee on particular elements of this discussion draft, with an eye towards producing a list of specific feedback, specific comments that most of the people on the subcommittee can support. That is to say, a consensus support. Tonight, we're going to focus on comments that are related to land use and mobility and all of the specific policies, overlays, and supplemental development regulations that are associated with land use and mobility. In May and June, we'll turn to parks and rec, open space, urban greening, and then urban design and policies and regulations related to those, and pick up whatever else it is that we haven't got to by then. Following our June meeting, the subcommittee is going to deliver this feedback to the UCPG for its own deliberations and for a vote. And to move us in that direction, we're keeping a matrix of comments which has been shared with the agenda. I was going to have it to brandish. I could pretend this is it. It looks like this. It's got comments that have been received so far. And we plan to use this to provide specific, detailed, and focused comments for the city, and also to refine and condense those into comments and recommendations that the subcommittee can support, right, as a body. That matrix will also help us to record what feedback has been proposed, what's been incorporated, and what has not. All right? So tonight we're looking to add to that list, to refine it, and we would ask speakers from the audience as well as subcommittee members to please focus on trying to share specific suggestions on the discussion draft that may not already appear in the matrix. More on that in a minute. All right, I wanted to make a brief introduction and then move forward to a few comments about our process tonight, and then once we have a quorum here, to turn to the issues of role and the minutes. So the essence of planning is balance. It is looking out into the future from the present to try to imagine what a future city might look like, and to balance all of the elements that will be needed there to allow for economic growth, for community life to flourish, for commerce and retail to survive and to grow, for the environment to survive, for people to come and go without being in gridlock all the time, and many other things. It is a delicate balancing act, and many of us come to meetings with particular issues, but those of us who are on the committee are really working hard to try to balance those many issues, those competing imperatives and interests, recognizing them as important all, and to come up with the best draft for the future of University City, for the next generation. So I personally believe that the discussion draft and alternatives that are contained in it can serve as the basis for a plan that we could support in the future for both commercial and residential development. I'm going to talk about some of the favorable features of it, and then we're going to talk about things that we might like to adjust as we go. But I think in its favor, the discussion draft includes robust commercial and residential development for University City. It maximizes our public transit potential in the Mid-Coast Trolley. It creates flexibility for development in the future through mixed-use zones. It supports the climate action plan of the city, which is essential to all of us, and certainly to our children and to all the other species on Earth. It reaffirms some of the city's environmental commitments to open space and to the MSCP. The plan in particular, I think, makes a significant contribution to housing and jobs. We'll be discussing this tonight. At build-out, the staff preferred scenario provides room for about 32,500 new housing units in the university community. And in addition to that, about 59,000 new jobs. That is a little more than approximately a doubling of residential and commercial intensity in University City, 2x. I would note that the housing number is in addition to more than 10,000 units of housing at UCSD that have been completed or are planned to be completed in the next 2 years that have started since our update began in 2018. Taken together, this is a potential for more new housing in University City than any community plan area in the city of San Diego. For further context, we should note that the SANDAG planning agency grant that kicked off this process in 2018 set a goal for University City for the plan of having about 20 to 30,000 new units, and so we're a little on the north side of that, but in the ballpark. And that would include homes for a projected 80,000 residents. And for further context, we might note that 80,000 is more than the population of San Diego grew between 2010 and 2020, and that there's 42 planning areas in San Diego. There is also a community-supported discussion or draft of the land use plan in here, which has approximately projected potential for about 22,500 new units, and that too is within the SANDAG target area that set the process off. The discussion draft includes plans for 3 new linear parks and a pedestrian promenade on Executive Drive. It includes improved interface with UCSD's East Campus, regulations for what they call context-sensitive design to protect open space edges and also development adjacent to highways. It includes improved open space protection and set-asides, on-site park requirements for residential development, on-site public space requirements for commercial developments, regulations to preserve community-serving retail and other uses, as well as plans for robust new bike and pedestrian infrastructure, including protected bike lanes on some key corridors. It does not rezone single-family areas in University City. All of these things are things that the committee has supported, and I would also note that the plan has language prioritizing affordable housing, which has been another key goal expressed by this group, and it proposes to develop a University City-specific inclusionary affordable housing requirement above the city level. This was a specific request of this committee. We appreciate its inclusion, and we expect that the city's analysis will return a robust inclusionary requirement. It's under study right now. Other priorities of this group have included protections against displacement of lower and moderate income renters in the lowest price housing in the community, protection and expansion of communities serving retail and other uses, and a variety of other priorities. I want to say a couple words about comportment at the meeting tonight, and to make sure that we have a robust, productive, and respectful debate and conversation. We should note the UC is part of a much larger whole, the larger city of San Diego. We are a distinctive part. We are the heart of the city's most dynamic economic engine, the core of its dynamic biotech and life sciences industries, increasingly its high-tech economy as well. We have the region's leading theater cluster here. We've got world-class shopping. And we're also among the most biodiverse places in the most biodiverse metropolitan area in North America. We are also home to a top 20 global university and 4 state and national leading hospitals. We're also fundamentally a great place to live, a great place to work, to study, to build families and lives. And I think I am in agreement with the members of the subcommittee that we hope that those things will remain the same when this committee is done with its work and the city plan is updated. Given all of this, all of the interests, all the values, it's not surprising that emotions run high when we're talking about our future, the future of the city, our imagination for a better city, which is, after all, an imagination for a better world, a better society. The interests here are intense. They include a great deal of money at stake for some. Certainly billions of dollars of value in real estate are on the table. For others, this is a landscape of home and meaning. And it is also a landscape of hope for the future. And so University City, as I said at last month's meeting, is a region where global capitalist real estate development comes together with everyday life in California. That makes us a place very similar to many other places in California where this critical conversation is happening. And so we are like other places with similar pressures, similar needs for compromise, similar needs for careful balancing, similar needs for careful analysis. We should expect to disagree tonight. I would expect that we don't all agree on everything that's before us. These are matters that are important, but there's not any reason that we cannot disagree without being disagreeable. I expect us to disagree robustly. I also expect us to do it with respect and civility for one another. And it's not just that I expect this, but we should expect it of each other and of ourselves. All right? Our hope tonight is to hear speakers and subcommittee members focus on specific suggestions on the discussion draft that may not already have appeared in the matrix which has been shared of comments. We have, I will note, 3 meetings, 6 hours, 200 pages of text and diagrams to try to engage as a subcommittee. That is detailed, comprehensive material. A lot of it is also new. And rather than devote the bulk of tonight's meeting to many repeated comments that are already part of our record in the matrix, I may exercise a prerogative to invite participants with similar concerns to share their opinions by writing them in the written comment cards which are available on every table. And then I may move the discussion forward as needed. All comments received, in whatever form, are going to be taken in and included in our matrix going forward. So whether you stand up and say it or write it down and hand it to me after the meeting, it will be included and considered, okay? So I think with that preface and understanding, I would move us into the discussion portion, except that before that, I need to do a little bit of administrative business to start the meeting, to get a roll called and to approve our minutes, and then we'll move into there. All right, so I'll put a period in that, or a pin in that, and I'm going to turn us to roll call and approval of the minutes. Then we'll take non-agenda public comment, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And we're going to probably hold that to a minute, minute and a half, okay? And so on the agenda tonight is land use, mobility, and the specific regulations that are connected to that. If you've got a comment that's not on that agenda, that's not about that subject, you can make that in the non-agenda public comment. Otherwise, you can reserve it for the agendized item or portion of the meeting, okay? So first off, let me take the roll. I saw Carol Uribe, okay, Business Area 1. Carol is here. Rebecca Robinson, Business Area 2. No Rebecca, okay. Jason Moorhead, Business Area 3, UCPG, Subcommittee member. No. Andrew Weiss, Residential Area 1, I'm here. Joanne Selleck, I see you're here. Roger Kavanaugh. No. UCSD faculty, Peter Crissell. Hey, good to see you, Peter. I didn't know. We should find a space for you up here. UCSD student representative, Aiden Lynn. I see Aiden, thank you. UCSD administration representative, planning department, Anu Delory.
She's not here.
Not here today. MCAS Miramar representative, Kristen Camper. Not here. Community subcommittee members, business, George Latimer.
Hi.
Good to see you, George. Lori Phillips. Good to see you, Lori. Thank you. Dinesh Martin, residential subcommittee member. Good to see you. Veronica Ayesta is residential member, not here. Residential member Keith Janae. Are you here, Keith?
No, he's under the weather.
Under the weather. Friends of Rose Canyon representative Debbie Knight. Biocom representative Melanie Cohn. University City Community Association representative Katie Rodlico. Okay. Do we have a quorum?
Yeah, 10.
Slipped it under the wire. Great. Okay. I would like to ask for approval of the minutes. Minutes were shared with the subcommittee members. And if you have any suggestions, amendments, subtractions, please share those now. Any changes to the minute you'd like? Yes.
I don't think I got minutes. Yeah, I'm not sure I got them either, other than my unofficial copy, so I could write the newsletter.
Okay, I think they went out over the, on the website, but as draft. But let me check.
Not in the meeting materials.
Okay.
I didn't see.
All right, then we'll defer those till the next meeting.
We're going to skip those.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. Thanks for noting that. All right, we will take non-agenda public comment. And if you would like to speak, I'll keep a speakers list. You could raise your hand, and I'll come around and I'll hand you the microphone. There's one in the back. Okay, sure enough.
Hi, my name is Jesse O'Sullivan. I'm Policy Counsel at Circulate San Diego. 2 months ago, I was here, some other pro-housing folks were here, and every time a pro-housing person got up to speak, we were interrupted, we were booed, we were hissed at, we were told our voices didn't matter because we were students or because we were renters. And so that got around. People know that happened. And this time around, when I asked people to show up to this meeting, it's a really tough sell to say, hey, we want you to come to this meeting so you can go get booed at or hissed at or told that your voice doesn't matter. And so when we hear what the voices in this room are saying tonight, I want you to remember the people that aren't here, either because they don't feel welcome here or because they're not able to make it.
Do you live in the area?
Thank you, Jesse. We are not going to, non-agenda public comment is not a back and forth or a debate. It is an opportunity for people to share. We're going to hang on to those. We're going to hang on to those respectful comments. Everyone here who's a resident of the city of San Diego has a right to speak and to be heard. All right, and that's how we're going to run. All right, I've got 2 over here, 3 over there.
Hello, my name is Diane DeRay. This is something that happened during last week's meeting at the Zoom call. And so Sprouts is now slotted for 569 units. If you go right down the hill, the Palisades building, it has 300 units. So our last live meeting here, The developer told us to close our eyes and imagine electric shuttles. I would say to all of you, close your eyes, imagine doubling the size of those apartments and 1 lane each way in Governor.
Thank you.
Okay,
Probably agenda.
my name is Jen Dunaway. I'll try to stick to non-agenda comments for this portion. One's a question. So how is the city documenting all the verbal comments at these meetings? Is someone taking notes? Especially the February meeting that we had, there were a lot of verbal comments, and I didn't see anyone taking notes. So I'm wondering how all of those comments are being rolled into the scenarios in the plan update. So that's a question. Non-agenda comment items. A fellow mentioned Circulate San Diego. I'm assuming some of those folks maybe live in UC. If you do live in UC, raise your hand. We all have vested interests here. We have vested interests in our quality of life and our culture here. If you don't live here, it's a public meeting. You're welcome to attend. I get that. But honestly, I think you should take your passion and go to your community planning group and show that passion there, because I have a hard time believing that people who don't live here have a vested interest in the quality of life and the culture here. Last thing on non-agenda items, the city mentioned the housing crisis over and over again. I keep hearing that term. I've asked the mayor's office to define what that is, and I like data, so I asked for data or studies to show how adding housing units reduce rents, as this is the rationale that the mayor is suggesting. Specific studies in California would be the most transparent, so that's what I would like to see. And show how it's been successful in UC, because in UC we've added thousands of units over the last 10 to 20 years, and rents have actually gone up. So if there's actually studies out there that show that adding housing units decrease rents in California, I would love to see them. Thank you.
First answer, an answer to the question, which was about. Sorry about that. An answer to the question, yes, minutes are being taken, very careful minutes are being taken, and they're being checked against the video record that we have. So yes, comments are being recorded, and they are being entered into the comments matrix.
Your name? Andy Weiss.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Go ahead. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Ramirez. I am a resident of University City for 18 years now. First off, apologies for not feeling like you were respected in the last meeting. Can appreciate how that was. There were a lot of jeers and a lot of hooping and hollering, and rightfully so. I feel it is justified. You know, UC is a very interesting city, and it's a community that I've been a part of since I went to UCSD long time ago. And I knew back then I wanted to be part of this community. I also knew back then I wasn't a part of the community. I didn't participate in the community activities. I didn't have any kids that leverage the facilities. What else? I didn't pick up trash. I probably created some. I drank a lot of beer in the house off Governor. Did all these wonderful things that college students love to do. But at the end of the day, I wasn't part of the fabric of this community. You know, here in UC, excuse me, I haven't eaten all day or drank anything, so I apologize. Here in UC, we don't define being a resident just where I domicile. Here in this city, you're a resident when you're a fabric of this community. When your kids pick up the trash in the gutters because they care about the environment of this neighborhood. You're a member of this community when your kids go to school and try to get a good education. I have 3 young daughters, 8, 6, and 2, and I pulled them out of a charter school that I had to apply to because I wanted to be part of this community. I walk them to school every day. They're going to be part of this community, and I plan to live and die in the house that I live in because I want to be a member of this community. And I feel really offended, and you should too, for the idea that somebody who doesn't have any skin in the game in this neighborhood to come into this area and tell you what to do with your neighborhood. To inject 58,000 homes, they're not going to come on bikes.
15 seconds.
They're not going to come on e-bikes. We're not going to use a gondola to magically whisk us away to wherever we need to go. That was an actual idea. This city can't even fill potholes. So whatever idea you guys have in your head about solving the housing crisis and doing so by destroying a community, you only need to look as far as downtown, Ash Street, any number of failed initiatives that city leaders have accomplished, for lack of a better term, in 1 minute. This is my home, and I'm going to fight to the end. Just so you know, it's a failed. Solve a problem. This is not the way to solve a problem.
Just one. I heard repeatedly the statement in Mr. Weiss's opening remarks. This is finding a plan the subcommittee can support. The subcommittee reports to the planning group. The planning group are elected personnel that are supposed to represent the community. That's what elected people are supposed to do. We shouldn't be putting forth a plan that the subcommittee can support in their own personal opinions. We should be putting together a plan that the community supports. Because the purpose of people who are elected to positions is supposed to represent the community. Lastly, I would also say, I do appreciate the one gentleman identifying who he is from. In the last meeting, many people did not. I believe, actually I'm certain, that it is a requirement of state law that anybody who is representing any form of lobbying organization must specifically identify what that organization is and who they represent. And I would ask that they do that. Thank you.
Public comment.
Hi, my name is Nancy Powell. I have been a resident of University City since 1998. It's a great place to live. And I also think that people that don't live here shouldn't have a say in any of this conversation. Go to their community. That was the sideline. What I really wanted to say is, why is 40% of the total proposed housing that the city of San Diego is proposing targeted for University City? There's 52 communities. Why is 40% of the housing that they want to build, that they think we need, here?
And I am going to exercise prerogative to move that point of view is noted. Thank you. Okay. So tonight we have an opportunity to discuss the community discussion draft, which is before us, and we have received many comments over 4.5 years of meetings to this point. Now we have specific language, specific policies, specific diagrams before us, and it is especially valuable in a room that is filled with people who have very specific knowledge about particular places to help us make sure that this plan doesn't screw things up, to put it colloquially, right? To make sure that mistakes are not made, to make sure that all of our eyes are on the document. And that's true whether or not we support the volume of the changes that are being proposed. It's very much true looking at the details of what's being proposed. Because this plan will be used by groups like the UCPG and by city engineers and city staff to evaluate projects that come forward in the future. And so it's important that we make sure we get it as right as we can, okay? And so I'm going to invite as many comments as we can receive tonight that are specifically focused on particular pieces of the plan. And I'm going to invite members of the audience to offer feedback related to issues of land use or mobility. And like I said at the outset, I'm going to try to move us forward towards a discussion of specific areas and ideas. If questions, I'll try to turn those into comments and try to reflect and model the way that I think would be most helpful to the city and to our process, with the hope that we can move to a conversation among the subcommittee members that is in the direction of offering feedback to the city that it can use from this group in making revisions over the next several months. Okay. So I would like to invite members of the public first off to speak, and then I'll start to incorporate subcommittee members. Many people are here, and I do want to offer an opportunity for people to have to say a few things about the plan. And again, like I said, specific comments related to issues which may not have been noted, which may not be on the record already. And I'm going to try to do my best to
And could you put up the map of the plan? For this
thank you,
discussion?
yes.
Yeah, let me get.
I see Lisa and Bill.
Hi, my name is Lisa Hycroft. I'm a retired physician and a geriatrician by training, and I've lived in University City for since 1990. Raised my 3 kids, all went to local schools. I'm a UCSD grad, Revelle College, and great supporter of the university in general. I'm concerned about the tenor of the conversation and the planning in terms of ageism. I hear a lot of advocacy around the student population, and I think that's extremely important. I was a student once too, living in a pretty crumbling place in PB. You know,
It's a rite of passage.
it was it was affordable at the time and probably isn't now. So I get that, I really get it. But I also get that many residents here are seniors. Many of us were original, not me myself, but were original residents of this community, have associations with the university and other industries and businesses in town. And I feel like we deserve respect for that too, and some recognition. We are not all gonna get on our bicycles and go grocery shopping on our bikes. We're not gonna go to our medical appointments on bicycles. The trolley will get us there because we have to get to the trolley from South UC. People want to age in place. We can't all afford, nor do we all want to go to the V, or Belmont Village, or wherever. So we want to age in place. And so what I'm concerned about is, have the needs of seniors been acknowledged and respected in this process? And I think that mostly impacts the transportation issue and the narrowing of the transportation corridors and lack of provision of the kind of transportation that seniors will need.
Thank you, Lisa. I'll take the very specific piece of that comment at the end, which was to ensure that there is planning that takes the account of all age groups into account. And that planning includes mobility by automobile, in addition to the new multimodal transportation. Bill Beck, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Andy. My name is Bill Beck. I live in North UC, and I just have 2 questions. When the committee makes its suggestions to the city, they're just that, if I'm not mistaken, suggestions. They don't have to obey or listen to or follow along the suggestions of what you're voting on. Is that correct?
We recommend to the UCPG.
Okay.
UCPG recommends.
And the city can take that advice or not take
They
it?
are
Okay.
representatives of the city, elected by,
Okay.
appointed by, and run by the
So-
government, elected by the people.
Okay. Second question that I have is that with all the ideas that are being floated, like bike lanes, pathways, et cetera, where is the money coming from? I just don't understand, over the next 30 years, or whatever this plan will be, how does the city expect to pay for all these grandiose ideas, good ideas for the most part, but how do they pay for the parks? I've been trying to get 3 street lights in my community for 9 years. 3 street lights, $150,000 in total. Can't get them. So I'm just curious about the great ideas being paid for, whether you like them or not, how are they going to pay for them? Thanks, Andy.
That's a comment about implementation, and I believe that the sharp end of that comment is that we need to plan for implementation that will provide for the facilities that we will need in the future, and that maybe that might even include that the city consider prioritizing a list as part of the community plan, prioritizing those elements of our mobility, especially, which are absolutely necessary, which are most important for things to work, and making sure that those things get done first. But I would say that the way that the city pays for infrastructure typically is that development takes place and the funding for infrastructure that's adjacent to properties tends to get updated in following the plan, but often that may happen in a piecemeal way. And then sometimes there are larger sources of funding, either from the general budget or from some other source that will help to supplement and pay for larger infrastructure projects, at one time. See you and then Linda. Go ahead.
Forgive me if I don't stand. I'm Charlie Frazier. I have been a resident and property owner in University City for 47 years. I read the plan with great interest. I would like to applaud it on the first page of Vision and Land Use Framework for the statement that we should have property for all ages. That's great. And then I would like to say that I have this against the plan. Throughout, it assumes that driving equates to greenhouse emissions, and it ignores the electric vehicles. And I think that's a major hole in your planning assumptions that needs to be addressed. I did go through the whole plan and got printed out parts with comments. Okay, age and disability discrimination, which I find in the plan on priority number 5, streets designed for people. Forgive me, I have to put my glasses on. On that slide is at the very top right section, reduce the stress on cyclists. It says, making it easier for people to cycle improves mobility for everyone, even people unable to cycle. I think that's really age and disability discrimination. Let's see. Community planning group subcommittee input scenario. All right, there's a figure 3, which unfortunately on my computer winds up being on different pages.
What page, Charlie?
I've got page 31 right now. All right, and I want to talk, as a member of La Jolla Community Church, I would like to comment on the fact that my church and the Good Samaritan are shown as an urban village with 0 to 146 dwelling units per acre. I would like to note that my church did try to do that a few years ago, and it turns out there's a covenant in the deed or title which says it has to be approved by all the other property owners in this particular group of people, and which they wouldn't do. In fact, we heard, I'm quoting somebody else told me this, that one of the people who put up a 4-story building in that particular area had to pay $1 million to the other landholders to do that. Question is, will this plan nullify those covenants? No. Okay, so then why not show at least La Jolla Community Church and the Good Samaritan Church as institutional, as the Mormon Temple is shown, and University Community United Church as places of worship, which is on page 88, okay? Or I need it as worship, places of worship, okay? Which is also shown on page 88.
I can take that, you can take that as a comment.
All right. All right, we go to, I get page 89. There's a picture that supposedly illustrates illustration of a complete street. I note there's no handicap parking on that complete street, nor is handicap parking addressed anywhere in the plan, as far as I could find. There's a section on page, this is 99. It's called active transportation, which is getting around that is powered by human energy, primarily walking and bicycling. Commutes that prioritize active transportation and active in their routines. Active transportation is also the clearest mobility option, which lessens air pollution and makes for a healthier environment. Economic vitality can also increase from active transportation because people traveling at human power speeds are more likely to stop at local places. Overall, quality of life can increase from continued investment in active transportation system. That's on your feet, on a bicycle. And I'm going to say that's age and disability discrimination.
Oh, can I sharpen those up and then keep moving things around and come back to you? That was 5 minutes? That was 5 minutes, but
Sorry.
no, not at all. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the detail, and I think that's a model for what I hope that we can receive. That's very helpful. I would sharpen that to suggest that I also noticed that there was an assumption that automotive transportation would be by gas-powered auto, right? And therefore, is a problem with our climate action plan. But EVs didn't seem to appear with the same level of detail, and I think that that's something that should be part of the mobility planning for our plan, including parking for EVs. I think the handicap parking is another point. I would respond in terms of the complete streets, those street diagrams. They take a longitudinal slice across the street at one particular point, and that might not be a point where there could be handicap parking. But the comment is noted that there should be in our plan provisions for persons who need that handicap parking. Okay, and I'll come back around to you if you've got further. Okay, I thought you might. But let's keep it moving. I saw Linda and then Pete.
Hello, I'm Linda Beresford. I'm a longtime resident of University City. I have made these comments before, and at the risk of getting booted off, I am going to make them again because because I know that I've made these comments before, and I estimate tens, dozens, possibly hundreds of people have made these comments, but yet there was almost no change from scenario A, right, A, to the city's preferred scenario that they introduce now, with the exception of increasing housing. So even though I write them and say them, there seems to get little traction. So the Vons and Sprout shopping centers on Governor Drive, they're both zoned for up to 29 dwelling units per acre. The city's preferred plan goes up to 73 dwelling units per acre. I think that should be reduced to back and maintained at 29 dwelling units per acre. I don't think there should be a reduction of lanes on Governor Drive. Both of those reasons, I think, are because there is an assumption that we're going to have an increase in busing, and I think the national shortage of bus drivers plus MTS's budget makes it extremely unlikely that we will get an increase in bus service. Plus, I know that the city has identified many mobility hubs, and I think that's very unlikely that we will get funding to install any of those. I do think for all of the commercial units, I apologize, I don't have the exact page of the chart, but the language in the chart says things like retain commercial services if feasible, if possible, or consider unbundled parking. And my specific recommendation is that for all locations that have commercial services, such as grocery stores, pharmacies, we need to require that those services be retained if they are going to add housing. I'm still not, even though I've been at this for like a year, I still don't know how the zoning component gets incorporated into this or when, but we need to protect, it needs to be a requirement, not just if feasible. I also oppose, again, I'm not a planner, tried to do a little study on what unbundled parking meant, couldn't really figure that out. So we need to have on-site parking both for the commercial services and for people who are going to live there, because we don't have the transportation, particularly in South University City. I do think we should go back, the city's preferred, and all these comments are for the city's preferred scenario. I'm not satisfied with the response of, oh, it's in the community scenario, even though the city has clearly said that they're going to advance the city scenario. I think we need to go back to the less increase in housing I can't say specific locations, and I do, although there are many locations that I think go up to 200, north of 200 dwelling units per acre. I know that our comments recommended a limit of 140 units per acre. Part of that is we have no ability to add any significant parks. I know they're talking about pocket parks and plazas, but that's not an increase of actual park space. I know that the city tried to move to a point system. I submitted a question to the city to say, does anyone else in the nation use this point system? I did not get a response to that question. I don't think we have the support services. My son went to Northern Division to ask a question of the police. They only have public hours for 2 days a week for a few hours a day. He went back on one of the designated hours. They were not open. We do not have the police services in Northern Division to support this. Another reason for maintaining at 140 dwelling units per acre is this does not seem to account for any of the ADUs and does not seem to account for the increase in housing that I know the city hopes to get when it adopts its SP10 Housing 2.0 package. So it's very hard to track all of these things that are happening at once. And there doesn't seem to be any account for that in this plan. That should be accounted in this plan. And then my last comment is that we need to include a percentage that requires every housing package to include some percentage of affordable housing. In lieu fees don't work. Off-site credits don't work. If they're gonna build it, they have to include the affordable housing. We have a crisis. Let's build the housing that we say we need.
Thank you, Rita. So we have heard those comments before, but I think it's valuable to get them onto the table. But if others would like to make a comment to that effect, and Linda has just said it, then you can say what Linda said, and then we can go forward. Okay? So that would be my request. What were some of the questions there? Unbundled parking. What does that mean? Unbundled parking refers to instead of providing for free parking as part of a rent, that renters might pay less if they don't receive a parking space. So they can choose to pay for the parking or not to pay for the parking, and it should reduce the cost.
But then they park on the street. So they need to include parking.
And then the other point that I would note for everyone, this is a great frustration, I think, right? This is a plan, right? This is a plan for land use and mobility, right? And it's a plan for the long term in the future. It is not implementation, right, of that plan. It is not everyday operations of the city. And everyone in the room, I'm sure, would agree that there is often a great disconnect between what the city can promise and what the city has promised and what it can deliver. We understand many of the reasons that is, and that's going to be true here, and that would be true regardless of what was in this plan. This is a plan for what could happen, what might happen, but it will still have to be implemented. It will still have to be paid for. The city of San Diego and citizens in the future will have to do that. All right. So I saw your hand. There are several folks over here. I'm going to come to you.
Did you forget him? You called him next.
I did call him next, and I did
Thank
forget.
you, Andy.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. You know, in going through this plan, I don't have young children. My grandsons are in their 20s. But where are the schools? You want to add, 30,000 residences. Where are the schools? They're not there. There's nothing in the plan. My daughter's a school teacher, and she worries about those kind of things. But what are you going to do with the kids? So if you build those kind of things, that's handled by the way you've managed to set up this city of apartments. That's what Europe did. If you look at the population of Europe today, the size of the normal home, average home in Germany, in Italy, in France, in the Nordic countries, is less than 700 square feet. Now they have subways, they have those kind of things back. But what is their age of their school children? It's 0.7. Or their birth rate, rather, is 0.7. You need 2.2 to even stay even on birth rate. People don't raise children in apartments that are 600 square feet. They just don't. If they do, they end up in a divorce or worse. So that's not in this plan. So what are we supposed to do with the kids? Drown them or something? I mean, what are we supposed to do? I quote the old senator who said that. What are we supposed to do? Drown the little whatever. But what is the question here is where are the schools? I don't see any schools in these plans. I don't see any parking for people keeping up because they stopped busing kids, you know. They don't bus kids anymore. People drive up and pick up their kids and drop them off. Go outside of Stanley, they want to make that 2-lane road. Go outside of Stanley when they're putting kids in there and taking kids out, or Curry. I mean, if that was a 2-lane street, you'd spend 40 minutes in that street trying to go 1 mile. So this plan is failing from the beginning. It doesn't do anything for our population. It doesn't do anything for our families. You know, people don't raise kids in a 600-square-foot apartment. They just don't do it. I mean, I spent 30 years in the Navy, and I know what it is to live in a little tiny apartment and try to raise kids. And he's one of them. You know, it just doesn't work, and I'd like to see some consideration of that factor. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would throw this back to the subcommittee, and I would say that I think that probably there's a consensus on the subcommittee that it's critical that the city coordinate, communicate robustly with the city schools. There is a paragraph about how that communication takes place. I think it's on page 160. You should read it. The city does communicate with the school district, but I think it would be valuable to enhance that paragraph, maybe make it a little sharper, and note that communication should be transparent, because that is a critical issue of whether the plan can be serviced, and that's true of parks, schools, streets, and other things as well.
Water.
That too. All right. So, is there a heads nodding? Is there a consensus that maybe a slightly sharper paragraph about transparent, robust, clear communication in advance and coordination with the school department is part of the policies that are in this plan?
Absolutely.
Could I
Is there any objection to that?
No, but I think the issue that is there, which is that and we actually had this in our big goals, that there's place for families, and not just, students, young people, that people who have 2 or 3 kids, or even 1 kid, that there's housing that is both affordable for young families and also has, 2 or 3 bedroom apartments, not a vast majority being studios and 1 bedroom apartments.
I'm going to take 2 more comments from over here, and then I'm going to move to the subcommittee and try to maybe move us through some issues that we have already raised. A lot of comments are being raised that are familiar. I'll take 1 here and 1 there. And then we'll begin to talk a little bit and maybe see if we can come up with some consensus ideas to share with the city related to things that we've already talked about and things that you are raising right now. And then we'll open it back up. Okay? So let me have you know. One here and 1 there. I'll take 2 comments and then.
Okay, so I've asked these same questions many times and I haven't gotten an answer from the city. Governor Drive. So I'm a civil engineer by trade. I've asked Mr. Alo, our transportation engineer, for data on traffic count surveys for Governor Drive because
Is this a specific comment that
this is about the 2-lane versus 1-lane.
All right. Turn it to a focused comment.
So I'd like to actually have us see the data and analyze it because this community plan should be based on data. And based on the existing traffic counts, which I haven't seen, and what's proposed for new population, I can't see as a civil engineer how it would justify 1 lane in each direction. Doesn't make sense, so it'd be great to see that data.
And if you have on this important issue, if you have specific comments about what pieces of that plan, in addition to all
it should be 2 lanes.
In addition to all of it, don't make sense, then please provide those comments specifically. Is there a particular intersection? Is there a particular stretch?
Governor Drive should be 2 lanes in each direction.
Okay.
Based on my personal opinion. Infrastructure plans, someone mentioned funding. Well, I'm concerned about infrastructure controls. So we propose all this density. We have limited land, we have limited roads. We're not going to be building new roads. So where's the storage for cars? Where's the fire egress? How is that going to happen? I think there was a comment made at the planning group meeting that all of San Diego is in a fire zone. That's not good fire planning and evacuation. I think we should talk to the fire department and find out what they have in terms of evacuation plans. And lastly, the Sprouts Lawns, I'll tack on a little bit to what Linda said. Again, looking at data, I've asked the city, where did these plans come from in terms of adding housing at Sprouts and Bonds? Because we're not in a TPA. Sprouts has one bus route, 105, that comes by periodically. So how does that justify? I think those proposals should be knocked out of the plan for both scenarios. Make sure that I'm coming on both scenarios. Thank you.
Please.
Hello, good evening. My name is Nicole Lilly. I'm a resident of University City. It has been said that this experience of updating our community's plan is an emotional one, that it is expected that we will disagree, but that we should keep that disagreement robust. I'm here still tonight despite the continued feelings of disregard and disrespect that young residents like myself have received from our fellow residents here in University City. This process is emotional for us as well. The decisions being made here now will be directly affecting myself, my generation, and my continued residence in University City. It's an emotional experience because every meeting youth and pro-housing advocates have attended, we've been met with disrespect and assumptions about our love and our future in this community. We are emotional too, and yet we've continued to share our perspective respectfully. We've heard you, and I hope you can accept us as the residents that we are, and hear us as well. I support the highest density scenario because this is my community too, and I'm passionate about welcoming all of my future neighbors who will come to University City regardless of whether or not we plan for them. I've heard during comments and during conversations that an expensive, run-down apartment and barriers to success is a rite of passage. I simply don't agree. I want a better future for myself and for the futures for the residents of all ages that will follow me. Adding high density, especially near transit, and why I support this scenario is essential to creating this better tomorrow. We need to not only plan for the use of high density development and essential mobility over the following years and decades because this plan won't be enacted overnight, but we must also push for the appropriate policies and development after we adopt this plan to ensure we can actually achieve this vision of a San Diego where it will no longer be a rite of passage to be rent burdened in a run-down apartment with too many roommates, all dependent on cars to attend school and live and work. Adopting these plans does not undo the hard work I know you've all done to own your homes. It does not destroy your homes, and it does not force anyone onto a bicycle. These arguments are disingenuous. I hope we can continue to have real conversations about how we can build a University City that the next generation may also find to be a beloved and lifelong home. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, what I'd like to try to, we'll come back. We'll come back. What I'd like to try to do, though, is to move to the subcommittee, which may have comments, and to try to move us in a direction of some specific items that we can consensus upon. Katie Rodolico, I see you and recognize you.
I want to talk about the map specifically. These are some errors that I saw on the map. It's missing Scripps Hospital, Scripps Anderson Hospital. It's missing the UCSD hospitals. It's the Torrey Pines City Park, also known as the Glider Port, is missing. Eastgate Mini Park, Eastgate Park number 2 is missing. And the overlooks that everybody keeps talking about don't show as parks. Let's see. There's this weird institutional stuff here at the off-ramps at 805. And I'm not sure why that would be. One side is a park and ride, but the other side is weeds. I'm not sure why that would be institutional. I'm still wondering why this block right here is very high, right here, is very high density, which is, 74 to 109 dwelling units per acre. Even at the lowest, at 74 dwelling units per acre, it's higher than the height limit. It doesn't make sense. The parcel between Via Regla and here is shown as open space. It should be shown as a golf course because it is zoned as a golf course and they're supposed to be putting it back as a golf course. The land behind Dino Park, right here, is shown as institutional. Should that be shown as utility since it's owned by the water department? Or open space since that's kind of what it is. I'm wondering about some parcels that I know people have tried to develop in the past. They're marked as open space, specifically the one at Regents and Pennant. I know it's been privately held and people have tried to develop it, but it's marked as open space. What happens to the people who own that? Do they just lose all their rights? Going to what Linda said about in lieu fees, on page 170.1.1D, change encourage low-income affordable housing to require affordable housing. So in page 171.1F, it talks about stacked flats with no stairs because it's for seniors. How is fire egress going to happen if you have multi-story with no stairs? And on page 171.2A, it says, if retail require or consider replacement of similar use, the word should be changed to require similar use. 171.3 A and B add houses of worship to the list so that La Jolla Community Church, Good Samaritan, and Beth Israel should be marked as institutional and should be, and churches should be part of that institutional use. It's included earlier in the document that houses of worship are institutional, but when you get down into the part that people actually follow for planning, churches aren't mentioned. On page 174, 2.9 A and D, you gotta pick one. One says for canyon-oriented development, orient the short side of the building perpendicular to the canyon. And then in D it says, orient views of the canyon by facing the building toward the canyon. So is it the short side or the wide side going towards the canyon? And something that I'd like to add to page 174, 2.1, it's talking about parking. When you're building parking garages, require the use of flat plate designs with ramps going between the levels. So then if cars do go away, you can repurpose the parking garage to some other use because it's flat. A lot of cities have done this. We need to require it here. And on page 175, 2.19A, remove the words where feasible. Just require it.
Requiring what?
I'd have to look at my document again. I did write that down.
All right, thank you very much. So, just a quick, maybe a quick response to that. The affordable housing. Where is that? Where's that item? What page is that?
Page 171.1B.
171.1B. That's the policy.
It says encourage.
That's a policy. Encourage affordable housing. Okay. I think we should have a little conversation in a minute about affordable housing, but I wanted to see where that is and look at that. The houses of worship as institutional. I mean, I know that the city is doing its best to properly categorize in the land use plan what the different land uses may be. I believe that there have been conversations that they have had with some of the different congregations in order to reflect appropriately what those congregations themselves would like to be designated as. But I would maybe, if we could, maybe the committee might suggest that the city make sure that they look very carefully and just assure that, that the institutional is not the most appropriate for churches. If they've not chosen institutional, then make sure that that box has been checked, and you can let us know that that's the case.
Institutional allows housing also.
And institutional allows housing, okay? So a preference to see the default for houses of worship as institutional, unless otherwise indicated by the congregations themselves. Anybody oppose that? Any opposition to that concept, George?
One of the problems that you got with that is some churches would really like to do low, moderate income housing.
Sure.
And I think to state that they can only be institutional may diminish that opportunity, and I think that would be a mistake.
And that's definitely not what I would propose for us,
The
but
document
rather.
specifically says institutional can include housing.
But I would say that what I'm suggesting is that we could recommend to the city that the default for houses of worship should be institutional, unless otherwise provided for by the congregations themselves, and that assures that the right checking has been done, and that we don't upzone houses of worship that don't wish to be. Is that?
The other element you've got here is churches have been known to say,
Change.
we can't afford to continue in business and want to sell their property. Now, the problem with that is it drives out, as the land values rise, it causes churches to move further out and away from their congregations. We've been fortunate in things like Temple Beth Israel have come into the community, but I'm not so sure that all of our religious institutions that currently exist are financially capable of making it over the next 2 or 3 decades.
And point taken, and I think that the flip side of that is we don't want to inappropriately upzone houses of worship to make it unaffordable to stay, right? So do we have consensus agreement that the city should, at least on default, go for institutional zoning where there are houses of worship, unless they have checked it with those congregations? That just assures that that's the default and not the other.
Also, not to forget the fact that we have churches in South University City, we have the Mormon Temple, etc. So in our discussion, we need to think of all the churches.
Yeah, and indeed, that is the spirit of what I'm suggesting and what I think.
Institutional. Those 3 were the ones that weren't.
Yeah. Okay. And there may be.
Would that make this easier? The ones that we were changing the land use on, we did not mark as institutional. They can be institutional in the plan, that's not a problem. It reverts to the underlying zoning anyway. With religious uses, we have to treat them the same as their neighbors. So if we're gonna change the land use of their adjacent property, we would treat them the same unless they indicate that they don't want to be changed. So the default is that we treat them like they're not necessarily a religious use, but any use that we would do in that area. So if we put the reason why I didn't put institutional on those was so you could see that we indicated that we would be changing it. Beth Israel has a commercial zoning underneath it, and so because we are raising the commercial zoning of the property adjacent, we would be doing it the same as the adjacent property. So that's why, so we were trying to let you see where we were making changes. We can put an institutional on because it functionally makes no difference. They would still get the same zoning as their neighbors, and then with that, they would be able to develop per that. So it's, if you guys wanted to show institutional on those, we can. We were just trying to show where there would be underlying land use changes. That's the only reason why we did that.
Okay, I think it would be valuable to have institutional as the default, and then we can continue that conversation about, yeah. So related to, I think it would be valuable to maybe have a conversation about some of the particular locations which bring the issues to some of the issues together, and at least begin to think about how these things come together. This committee has pushed for the significance of affordable housing and has asked for a specific inclusionary requirement in University City for housing of particular size or greater. And the city is studying that and going forward with that. It seems to me is a very good step. We've also expressed concerns about displacement of existing affordable to moderately affordable housing. and we have expressed concerns about displacement of community serving retail and other services, right? There's several places where those issues come together, and I think we should talk about them, and we can talk about them in turn. One of those places where they come together is in South University City, is at the Sprouts and the Vons plazas, right? And we've heard many comments about people's desire not to have any change at those plazas, or to have the change that is already provided for by the city in the current zoning, which is 29 dwelling units per acre. At 7 acres, that's whatever that is, 210 units on each plaza. But we've also heard specific concerns related to those, to the South UC plazas, including that community serving retail and services are preserved, perhaps by a requirement, a stronger language in policy, perhaps protected through zoning, community village zoning, perhaps stronger supplemental development regulations that ensure that as the community grows, we don't have all of the retail outcompeted by more competitive uses, of which there are many in the community. So the preservation of community serving retail and services. Adequate parking for the various ranges of reasons that we've heard. And also impacts on adjacent properties, and that the plan going forward would minimize impacts on adjacent properties to the greatest extent possible at whatever level of zoning it provided. We've also heard specific suggestions that housing that might be developed on these sites be focused towards Governor or Regents, as opposed to, or Genesee, as opposed to adjacent, to the low-rise neighbors. And we've heard suggestions that those plazas include, or maybe the plan itself includes, particular step backs or setbacks that would guarantee greater separation between any redevelopment there and adjoining neighbors. And I would like to see whether there is opposition on the committee to any of those particular items, and leaving off the table for the moment how much, right? We can talk about that in a minute, but let's make that a separate part of the conversation, not should the zone be 29 units per acre or 70 units per acre. Set that aside for a minute. Whatever redevelopment might happen there, I suspect that there's a consensus in this group, but I want to see whether we agree that there should be stronger, and that the city should work to figure out what the strongest protections are for community serving retail and services. That the city consider doing that specifically through zoning, and through the zone that would require that shopping plazas today are redeveloped as shopping plazas. That in the future that they would include adequate parking, and that adequate parking includes, EVs, charging stations. Well, we don't have to go down that road. Adequate parking for all residents of all ages. And that the city work on some stronger protections to minimize impacts on adjacent property, which could include focusing housing and higher density development on the street frontages as opposed to the backs, setbacks or step backs from adjacent housing, and maybe strengthening policy language on adjacent development on page 172 that kind of does some of those things. Are there thoughts about that package of ideas that we could recommend to the city to strengthen the plan and address concerns that have been raised in a range of fora? George, thank you.
I agree with the idea of retaining the community serving retail. My concern is that we get too specific in terms of what we require. That there has to be this kind of a shop or that kind of a shop or whatever. Times are changing. It may be 10, 15 years from now that the amount of retailing that's done online or by delivery is far greater, and somebody can't support the size of the supermarkets that are there. So I think we need to build in that kind of flexibility, but I certainly agree with the idea of, yes, there has to be community serving, and indeed, that is even better if you build more residential in the immediate area. You need more of those stores to serve the residential, both the existing and the new. The other thing I would like to see some emphasis on is better integration between the existing property owners and ownerships and the retail, so that you don't have to go out to the street and down to the corner and through a traffic signal to get to the retail. Why can't there be, pathways for walking, make it, as opposed to fencing off the retail and saying, no, we are an entity unto ourselves?
All right, so great, and just, I know that the city's policies include a range of features and policy suggestions about passage through properties, et cetera. But with your one caveat there of improved circulation and also flexibility, do we have a consensus, give or take, on the committee? Are there any other objections to that set of ideas for the South UC plazas? Joanne, comment.
It's not necessarily an objection, it's an expansion perhaps. The concept of community serving retail, we think of exactly that. Looking at South UC and what used to be in existence, and still is to a very small degree in North UC, is you also have your community serving small operator doctor's office, psychologist's office, dentist, things like that, who cannot afford to move into a Zymed building or a high-rise or anything else. And both those folks and community serving retail, a lot of the issue is going to be controlled by rents. So I think when we talk about community serving retail, we need to expand it to, in some fashion, include services.
Yes, and indeed, that's part of my sentence. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, retail and services, doctors' offices, copy shops, and veterinarians, all of that other stuff. I think, are there any other comments on those particular ideas about the South UC shopping plazas?
How do you think you'll control the rent?
We're not talking about rent. We're not going to touch rent. No, we can't touch rent. I don't think. I mean, that's not part of this. Yeah, Lori.
So I hear these conversations about protecting community serving retail in South UC.
That's just where it started.
Yeah, that's where it started. And unfortunately, this plan began with a distributed model for high-density areas, and I totally understand the South UC single-family communities pushing back on having that high density in their neighborhoods. Totally understand that. But the result is we still have that high-density housing. It's all been pushed into North UC, and I don't hear the same kind of language for the protection and the provision of places for shopping in North UC. They're going to put, more than 50,000 people there, and we've got 2 grocery stores. The Bristol Farms is gone. You can't park at Whole Foods, and you've got the Fonz and the Ralphs, and they're not that big, and that's not that much. You can't serve that size of community. So we need to make sure that not only we preserve it, but that we insist that some of this development includes additional retail, grocery and pharmacies and things like that.
Yes. That's next. That's next. But you also provide a segue. So I'm gonna declare consensus on that package of policies and suggestions, and I hope that we'll share that with the city, and then see what we can do to better preserve and protect in that way. We'll talk about the north in a minute. The other issue that's on the table.
Can I ask a fast question? You mentioned affordable. I just was curious.
Affordable often.
Are you going to go to affordable housing? You mentioned it. I'm just curious.
We're going to come to affordable, not as part of what we just discussed.
Okay, when you get to that, thank you.
And so the other question that we have before us in the South UC plazas is how many, right? And so I think that's a really important question that this committee should talk about. And I want to see if there's a consensus here about how many in the South UC plazas. Currently, the proposal in scenario A is a proposal for new rezoning of those plazas to include a potential for construction up to 70, I think, units per, 73 dwelling units per acre. All right, they're about 7 acres each, so that's approximately 500 units in each plaza. Okay? The current zoning is up to 29, which is, 29 dwelling units per acre times 7, your maximum of 210 or so units on each. The difference there is about 800 total. And I want to know what people think, and I will start. I think personally, and I'll take all the flack you want to give me, I think that the Vons Plaza is an appropriate place for perhaps up to that many housing units. I don't think the same is true for Sprouts, but I'll tell you why. And I don't know what other people think. I think that if we are truly serious about affordability, and this goes back to your issue, Bill, is that South UC is much less expensive than the North. The South is much less expensive, so the land basis is much less. The possibility for building housing, which is much less expensive in South University City, is greater than it is in the North. And if we truly don't want a future community which is only made up of apartments that start at $4,500 a month, which is what we have in all of the new construction now, if we don't want that kind of community, we truly want all of the voices that have spoken so far to have a place in the future of this community, then I think we should start with the generosity in our hearts in South University City to find space for some of those new residents. And I don't think that 500 on the potential maximum of 500, which may never ever happen, on the plaza at Vons is too many. That's my personal view, assuming all that other protection that I just talked about. And we want to get that right to make sure that we're not talking about 10-story towers adjacent to 2-story houses, right? I think the Sprouts is somewhat different, and the Sprouts is different because, for number one, it's not on any kind of a reasonable transit line, right? We also don't want to blow up our climate action plan with housing everywhere, right? More density everywhere. If we do that, we just have sprawl at 4 times the density, and our climate goals are destroyed. So I think that the South UC Sprout Plaza is too far from transit. It is unlikely probably ever, even if you add all kinds of new renters there, to be, or homeowners there, townhomes, to ever be sufficient to drive much better transit. It's different over at Vons. It's also configured a little bit differently, up against single-family houses, a steep canyon behind it, in which a high building will cast a shadow for a half mile. And so, for those reasons, I think that the Sprouts probably should have a lower density, more than 29 per acre, but less than 75. I don't know what the right number is. The city has got mathematicians who can work on issues like that. But that's what I would propose, is, that's where I am on this. And I don't know if we have anything that's like a consensus on this group, but I think we should talk about difficult subjects and see where we are. And then we can share no recommendation, or we can share a recommendation if we have one.
What would the height be with the proposal the Raiders have?
Oh, that's the thing I forgot to mention there, is that probably there should be some sort of a height limit on these places. We don't want towers. That's the other.
I'm curious, where in that shopping center would you propose there to be housing?
Up on top, adjacent, 4 stories, maybe 5.
Doesn't Nasty Mouse Hotel it'll be?
I'm not sure I think what we have now there is 30 feet limit, and the proposal in the plan is to eliminate a height limit?
No, we have a 100-foot height.
100-foot height limit, okay.
100
Okay.
So what is 500 units in a space like Ron's, what does that translate into in terms of height?
That would be a maximum, and it doesn't translate necessarily into a height. We could add, which we did not add, but we could add, and I think that probably we have support on this group for some sort of limit for height as well. I didn't add that, I forgot it.
I've looked at a lot of renditions of that density 0 to 73, and it depends on how those structures are configured, but it's something like 4 to 7 stories to achieve that density. It all depends on the size of the buildings and so forth, but it's not 3 stories. It's typically considerably higher.
4, yeah, okay, all right. Anyway, I laid my card's on the table. I would love to hear from other members of the subcommittee to hear what they think and where they think. I'm one voice, right? And I've shared. Well,
This is my question. Are you representing us, or are you just deciding among yourself and you go to the city? If you took a poll in this room, how many people are for any of this stuff you're talking about? I just don't get any of that. I mean, why did you go to the city and ask them why 40% of the whole thing that the city wants is us? I don't get the whole process. Why are we targeted? And I don't think we're being listened to. Let's take a poll here. How many people want a lot of this stuff here?
It's not a small number in the city.
Can I say something?
I want to have a conversation, not just we've already decided and it's over. I think we should have a conversation and see where other people are, and that's a conversation. And if it turns out that my ideas are wrong, then I'm open to changing that. All right, let's.
Can I say something
Yeah,
to this topic?
I got Peter Crystal first, who's had his hand up patiently for quite some time, and then Dinesh. And feel free, have at me.
Thank you for bringing that up. That was actually my question when I got to the end of the whole thing, where it says, I forget the exact language, but something like the city is going to go with alternative recommended by the staff, not with the community recommended alternative. And it says that that is based on that city staff recommended alternative meeting goals better and taking into account input of other stakeholders. Now, what I would really like to see is how does it meet those goals better? And who are these other stakeholders that are being listened to when we are not?
All right, back to the plazas and density there, or not.
Okay, I don't need the microphone. I just. Oh, okay, very well. I want to just address this issue that you're talking about with listening and who gets a say. I'll tell you, I've been doing this for about 5 years, and I absolutely listen to everything you all say. But being heard is not necessarily the same thing as getting your way, right? I mean, most of us here are parents. We listen to our kids. That doesn't mean we just give them what they want. And personally, I'm thankful that the current plan took account of me before I lived here. And so I think we at least have to give some thought to who will live here after us. And that doesn't mean that we just roll over and we build 100-foot towers where Sprouts is. That's not necessarily the answer. But we do have to think about who will come after us. So I just ask you to keep that in mind.
You have an opinion on my
idea? I think your comments are appropriate, that Sprouts is less suited for towers, higher density than Vaughn's. Because clearly I actually saw one of the double-length flexi buses going down Genesee the other day. That gives you an idea of how much transit there is on Genesee. No, they absolutely are not. I mean, my kids take those buses to school. Well, older one drives now, but and I've been on them before where it's 2 or 3 seats is all there is. And if you're in North UC on those buses, they're full.
In any event, Sprouts is poorly served under any.
Yeah, it's harder to see it happening over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other opinions on the subcommittee up here? I see Joanne. I see Aiden. Lori, we'll get you onto the floor as well.
I live in North UC and I want to talk about North UC, but on this particular issue, I don't have a perspective on yes or no for what you propose. Some of it sounds reasonable if we're going to have to increase the housing. But one of the reasons why I can't visualize how this is going to work is because Governor is so messed up. And I think if we had a much clearer idea of what Governor would look like and how people can get across Governor, because that's really a key here, we might be able to actually tackle the issue that you're talking about. To me, it's really tied up with transit, and we do not have a satisfactory answer on Governor as far as I'm concerned.
And then I saw Jeff.
Thanks, Andy. I appreciate your insight and recommendations on this issue. I also don't feel that I have enough perspective to comment on Sprouts, although I will say that I do believe that we should be pushing for as much mixed use as possible. And I think we have to start somewhere, and I think it makes sense in these plaza areas. But I do very much agree with your assessment of Vaughn's, especially because it is already connected by bus lines. I think that all of us should be pushing for better public transportation, better bus routes, more frequency, more capacity. And it sounds like a lot of the issues that people have with talking about relying on transit could be solved if we collectively pushed for better transit. And so if we were to come together and make that a reality, then I think absolutely looking at mixed use, 73 dwelling units per acre, especially at Vaughn's, makes a lot of sense. So I'm in agreement with you for the Vaughn's. I don't have enough information about Sprouts. Thank you.
Jeff had his hand up early, and then I'll take it over there.
So, Joanne, I agree with you about Governor. I've lived here now over 30 years. I've been a bike commuter to Mira Mesa to work. I live here, I raise my kids here. Governor, west of Genesee, used to be bike lanes. Used to have a buffer, a real bike lane. They're gone. They're gone from the cars. So when we talk about density, all I can think about is where's the mobility? The reason why I mention that, I want to come back to the plan with density. The plan shows us beautiful pictures, and it's taking it out of the National Association of City Transportation Officials. And it uses word for word from this document of how to have urban planning. But what I want to use the example of why it doesn't follow through. It just gives words and halfway measures. On Genesee, as a bike commuter, we were told by the trolley before they put it in that they would make the bike lanes equal or better than what it existed. And it existed as a continuous bike lane. There's hundreds of people who use those bike lanes, used to use those bike lanes every day. They're not there anymore because they put back what they have on Genesee now is so unsafe, and this is not my opinion. When you look at this document, it says traffic as it's turning right, crossing over where a biker is, has to slow up. There has to be bulb outs. You have to have traffic physically must slow up. That wasn't implemented in this last second iteration of how Genesee is built. So I wonder, and I ask, I've gone to the planning meeting. Nancy, you were there running the meeting. I asked, what is the city going to do to make Genesee safe for mobility, for bicyclists?
What are the things it needs to do?
It needs to follow the guidelines and not just cherry pick and make cars the most primary purpose. The cars have to, of course they're there, they're always going to be there. But if they're making right-hand turns, they have to slow up and not be going 45 miles an hour. Because all the people who want to ride their bikes, you get a car whizzing by you and you know, cutting you off, you stop riding your bike. You get into a car and now you're adding to the problem. You're another car. So the city really doesn't seem to be listening in University City. It isn't or some other sections where they're building the proper bulb outs for the right-hand turns. But whether it's commercial or whether it's people who don't want to slow up, I mean, I want to come back to Governor. Governor Drive is my... People need to be willing to get to someplace 60 seconds, maybe 90 seconds, a little slower, so their kids, their neighbors can ride their bikes to school and go to... I ride my bike to the store. I do my shopping 80% of the time on a bike. You have to slow up, and you have to be the physical barriers to force you to slow up so there can be more people on the road. And until I see the city really do that, it's just words. We're not seeing it here. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's the segue. The first thing I'll say is that we have nothing like a consensus on the idea that I floated, right? I'm the first person to recognize that. So we cannot recommend that to the city as this group. Right? I mean, but the city is going to go. The city will go forward with planning, and I believe that we should provide them with better than what's in the plan now. Let me take a couple here, but then what I want to do next is to turn to a conversation about Governor Drive. All right, and I'd like to get.
What about?
I'd like.
And what about UC?
We thought you guys were sensitive that way. Yeah, we're hearing something totally different than. About your revision, a consensus on your
Was a consensus against my idea? Is that what you said?
Well, your idea is what, 29 degrees?
No, I have a consensus for it. I for one, can't tell you how much I appreciate what you said tonight in regards to the possibility that you're willing to consider lesser in one and hopefully in the other, even a little bit, I think is wonderful. And I didn't hear that you didn't have consensus. I heard a couple comments otherwise, but I thought you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's keep this conversation going, but let's be open to a conversation. That's a conversation, right? So thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so I'm gonna hand the thing over here. We've got like 20 minutes in this room, so I would like to turn to another issue and try to move us forward.
I agree. I thought that the dialogue that was going forward was an improvement on what we've been hearing for the past many months. But I had a couple things that I wanted to comment on, and then maybe we can get back to that. One is that early on in this meeting, there was a statement that was made, I believe, by the city that none of the SB 9 or other initiatives that were increasing density throughout the city were part of the discussion, although we're looking at how to get X number of units out of this community and out of other communities across the city. So that just makes no sense. Well, why are we not looking at things like how many units we're getting in the city from SB 9, or how many we're expecting to, how many we are in the housing action plan that was just released? If anybody saw that, if anybody's had a chance to read that yet, the density, the number of units that is going to generate is astronomical. So 10 units, up to 10 units, plus 4 additional ones if you have some affordability in a single family residential zone neighborhood. So, and that's throughout pretty much the entire city. It's ridiculous not to be looking at those numbers when we adjust each of the community plans like the University City Community Plan. There's no reason for that. Also, we're ignoring the fact that there's ongoing development that just restarted in the retirement in the community. We have multiple development initiatives that we're ignoring, and we're not counting towards those numbers that we're trying to achieve. And I just don't get it. The other thing that I wanted to state earlier about the parks, I know we moved on from that topic, but I really believe that this plan should specify that property would be purchased in North UC for, most of this density we're talking about is gonna go into North UC.
Right.
Yet no
Right.
parks are being proposed to add there. And I don't mean a little strip of grass that your dog can go poo on. I mean something that kids can actually play a soccer game or a baseball game on. There's nothing there, and that's really inexcusable. I'm not, my kids are growing up and I don't live in North UC anyway, I live in South UC, but the people that are gonna move into North UC and occupy all these apartment buildings are gonna have a miserable life if they don't have somewhere to get out of their apartment into some green. They deserve, the future residents that are gonna be moving into North UC deserve a park.
I'm going to go back to the group over here, and several people have suggested that we must talk north and continue the conversation we were just having. We could talk about mobility, but we haven't talked about mobility really yet, and so I think let's extend the conversation and get this onto the table for the subcommittee about what to do with retail, with our retail plazas, right? And what belongs there, what's best there, and what our visions might be for those places. So one of the key areas north of Rose Canyon and west of I-5 actually is Nobel Square. It's the set of plazas where the Whole Foods and the Trader Joe's and the Ralph's are. And in the city's plan that is proposed for mixed use, the plan that's being proposed is one which would go beyond the coastal height limit, the local coastal height limit, and allow development that's higher than city voters approved back in 1970, whatever. That would require that the city revote that and change that. So it's planning in the expectation of, or if that happened. But if it did, then I think we should think more carefully about what goes there. And the proposal in the city's scenario is for mixed use, and mixed use which would allow housing at a relatively high density, would allow housing and retail, commercial, community serving services, regional serving uses, as well as other uses in mixed use. And so we've had a range of different conversations about what best belongs there. And I know that we had a conversation at our last meeting in which there was a certain amount of consensus on some of the things here. And so I'll state what I think might be consensus. I'll state my view, and I'll take the heat again, but why not open the conversation, okay? So it'd be my view that that is an area that's totally appropriate to lift the height limit, coastal height limit. I don't think it should be lifted to just whatever. I think that's a bad idea. But I think it should be lifted to something a little bit higher than it is. We've heard from the lobbyist for the owner of the property that 85 feet is the sweet spot. That's about 7 stories, maybe 5 stories with two stories of parking underneath. And so, sure, why not throw that out? Suggest that there could be development there that would be above the local coastal height limit of 30 feet, and it could go as high as 85, a new limit. The only reason you would want to do that, though, is not to expand the footprint of biotech and high tech in University City, but is to preserve retail in the north, and is to preserve and expand housing, right? This is an area that's just adjacent to the campus. This is an ideal place for the campus to partner with private real estate owners to build housing that's affordable to students and to have retail that would serve them, but it's got to continue to serve the north of here. 80,000 people is what's in the city's proposal, and Sprouts and Vons aren't going to serve them if we allow for the higher end uses to push out the community serving retail and the groceries, et cetera. That has happened at the Costa Verde site at the northwest corner of Genesee and Nobel. We have seen that, where the higher value uses have just pushed out a grocery store in the center of the community, the only one right there in the core. We can't have that in the future. We've got to preserve retail and service. So I guess what I would propose is, just like before, without talking about the density limits or whatever, just some specific ideas that this is an area that's appropriate for residents and retail, There's a lot of other areas in the space, in the plan that are appropriate for biotech, for high tech, et cetera. It should continue to have the kind of services that it has today, with the possibility for change as the market brings it. But I think that we should not have mixed use zoning there, which would allow for those other uses. I think we should protect retail and housing by a different zone, which is community village, or another zone that the city finds appropriate, that would assure that the redevelopment that does happen there at a higher level would be houses, and it would continue to have retail to serve those people and the rest of us. And I think we probably would want to add to that some of the same kind of protections about edges to adjoining property owners, especially just to the south, the condominiums that are just there, which are 2 stories. You don't want 8 or 10 stories or 7 stories just adjacent to those. So step backs and setbacks could be strengthened. And so that's what I would propose, is that we look at a robust rezoning of that area, that we include community village there, and that would be for retail and for residents, and we can sharpen that as we go. It's getting late and I'm getting tired. I'd like to hear opinions. So I see Debbie, George, Joanne, Peter after that, Katie, Aiden. Okay, we got a lot of interest. So let's go. Debbie first.
Yes, I would point out that area is not just those shopping centers. It includes the Sheraton, I believe, right? And the garage, the properties on La Jolla Village Drive, and the little shopping area, I forget what it's called in there. It's a it's a large area, and then it also includes areas to the west of that, which I'm not even sure what they are, but where the rock bottom was, and there's a lot of property there. So a couple of things, I feel really strongly, there is no park space over there, 0. And it is nowhere near Doyle. It's not walking distance to Doyle. It's not a pleasurable walk across the freeway. That there is, if there's a lot of added density, there needs to be significant park there. And not like, as somebody said, a strip of grass or a little play set or something, because you're going to want families to live there. Graduate students, young families, researchers, people like that. And I feel extremely strongly that is the area that needs significant, big enough to kick a soccer ball around on. So that's it.
All right, thanks. Pass it to Joanne. Joanne, George, and then Peter.
Okay, I'm going to add back in, I like that idea, Andy, and yes, you have consensus. I would only be in favor of lifting the height limit if residential were included in there. I have mentioned this before, and I think another item of growing importance with that is putting a pedestrian bridge between the Whole Foods and the Ralph Shopping Center, and also possibly between the lower portion of the hill down adjacent to Via La Jolla to get between the new extension building and what is now a gas station. The other thing that becomes very important in that area with this increase in density is street parking. And it's a mobility issue, and I can talk more about the issue as a whole, but I think we can't have it all. And I think we're getting to the point where the city really needs to look at removing street parking because of the amount of gridlock you're going to have with the addition of people, not only on Via La Jolla, but also on at least a large portion of Nobel. That also adds to the safety of cyclists and other modes of transportation.
Picking up on Debbie's comment, it is important, I think, that we allow hotel uses in this, because there is an existing hotel and it's been there a long time. It was there before most of us were in the community. The other thing is in terms of parking, because it's immediately adjacent to the trolley stop, the city doesn't require any parking for housing. That's just the way the rules of the city are at the moment. As a developer, I wouldn't go in there and develop without any parking, but that's what the city rules are. So we're kind of playing a game with ourselves if we're going to insist that people do a certain level of parking. The other thing I think on this site to keep in mind is this is designated as one of 2 regional shopping centers. And the density at UTC was more than doubled by the city even before we started talking about a plan update. So the people that own those areas over there have absolutely the right to go back to the city and say, you set the precedent, you allowed doubling of the density, I want my fair share. And I think the city's in difficulty trying not to give it to them. Now, in terms of what you've proposed, I wholeheartedly agree, except I'd suggest the density ought to be higher because it is a site, it's adjacent to public transportation, it's got freeway access, it's in the heart of the community in essence, it's adjacent to UCSD, and I think we should do everything we can to eliminate the 30-foot height restriction and do density that's up in the at least over 100. So in terms of consensus, I'd look for more, not less, than what you've suggested.
Thanks.
Okay, to add to this argument, I would actually wholeheartedly support increasing height. But when people talk about density, they sometimes envision that the whole area is going to be built up. So let's do 7 stories and the whole thing is going to be built up. Why not do 14 stories on half the site, which would allow for a park to be built? So I would argue for increasing height, at least of some buildings. There's definitely precedent and it's technically possible, which would open up areas that can be used for community spaces, green spaces, etc.
No? Yeah, but I think Katie was before.
It doesn't matter. You have a consensus on this. I like Peter's idea of carving out space for a park by having another building higher. I think even though the city says you don't need parking, we all know you will, even though the trolley's right there, which is why it makes sense to remove the height limit there. And I think if we can encourage smaller units as well as the 3-bedroom, it is adjacent to UCSD. So it is a spot where you might have single person apartments. So it seems like a good spot for it.
Thank you. I agree that we should retain community serving businesses, especially grocery stores. It seems like we're taking this in a direction that I would agree with in terms of adding more density or more height to this area. I'm a little worried about giving it the community village designation if that's going to preclude other uses of the space, like the hotel space. I also know there's an office space there that has a lot of doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists as well, right next to the gas station. So I don't know if making it a community village would make that not possible or push them out if they redeveloped. But I definitely agree. I think it can be a good use of mixed space. It's optimal because it's right next to the trolley, it's close to UCSD, more density, more height if possible. It makes sense here.
But not all biotech.
Yeah, we find space for, the city has found space.
So I'll offer a counterpoint, and that is that west of La Jolla Village Square, there are a lot of single-family homes. There are 2-story townhomes all along there. If you put 7-story structures hanging over those homes, it'll remove sunlight. It'll make them very unpleasant to own and live in. And I think we need to think about that. We also need to think about the area that's designated on the corner of Gilman and La Jolla Village Drive is designated for high-density housing. We have to take these high-density areas in the context of what's happening on the UCSD campus. That corner of UCSD, they just put 5 brand new, very large buildings there. I dare you to go stand in La Jolla Cliffs neighborhood west of those buildings and look up and see those buildings hanging over, you know, single-family homes. It's really, you know, challenging for the neighborhood. So I think there's a good rationale for putting some residential housing in at those 2 shopping centers. It can't remove parking because already a lot of people come to those shopping centers regionally. There, you can't walk from, you know, the areas, Sugarman and all those areas into that shopping center. There's no, you know, through cuts. You can't get there. And so I think we need to make sure that we retain parking for those shopping centers and that we not go so high as to really impose upon the residential neighborhoods that have been there for a long, long time. The final thing I want to say is that about parking. So with those big buildings going in on the UCS and traffic, those big buildings going in on the UCSD campus there, you add a lot of density in UTC adjacent to that, and that corner of Torrey Pines and La Jolla Village Drive and Scenic is going to be a real traffic mess. Parking, yeah, it already is. And parking is, has become a problem. It's always been a bit of a problem for the neighbors around that area, the single-family homes in that area. But as UCSD has built up dormitories there and has now precluded first-year students from having cars on campus, the students simply park in the residential neighborhoods. There is no protection for those residential neighborhoods from university parking. The condo complexes, the townhouse complexes west of those shopping centers and walking distance from the university are plagued by students who live on campus parking their cars there and using it as long-term parking. And they come in groups and shuffle the cars to make sure they don't get 72-hour tickets and that sort of stuff. But we can't continue to exclude parking and not protect the residents that exist there.
Thank you.
Okay, we have reached our time. The janitors here will have to clear us out in just a few minutes. So, but let me just summarize really quickly the conversation we're just having and also the larger conversation that we've been having. I hope that this is the kind of conversation that we can have next month and the following month. And I think we'll work with the city staff to find a place that can accommodate us until a little bit longer hour the next couple of times. This is great to be here in a public space and to go back to high school for a few hours, but I think we need more time. And so we're going to figure out how to make that possible. On this particular issue, what I heard was a lot of ideas, a lot of agreement, but also some differences. My initial idea was restricted just to those 2 commercial plazas and not to the areas down on La Jolla Village Drive where the city has proposed potential tower development. And we haven't really talked about just what the density level might be, and we should talk about that. But what I did hear is I think a consensus that we want to use zoning to protect this area for retail and for housing, right? That we want to ensure that there is sufficient parking there for all of the range of uses, as well as to maximize the value for the trolley that's there. We want more pedestrian and bike safety. The idea of the bridge is one that was floated last time. I support that. I know that Veronica also jumped on to support that last time. I believe we might be able to support that. It must include significant park space. I think that's consensus among us. And so this is an area where we really need to think carefully about that. Hotel uses, maybe those are best where there is hotel now and maybe not up on those plazas. There's a few other things that we can continue maybe to talk about. The other issue was the one that you just raised, which is about adjacency. The plan has got some language about policies to protect adjacent uses, and I think we could probably strengthen those. This would be an area where specifically it's important to think about setbacks from townhomes across the street. This can be done. It's being done in many, many places. It just needs to be done. It needs to be done right, right? We want to have an input into that, as well as the owners of those properties, who will try to do it right, we hope, but we want to have input in that too. All right, I'm going to say thank you to everybody for a respectful conversation, for an emotional conversation, for a difficult conversation. We're still talking, and I hope that next time we come back, we can continue to get very specific proposals and plans. And note that we have a plan on the table. City of San Diego has put a plan on the table, and I know there are many people here who like it, and maybe many people who don't. But that's the plan that's on the table. What we're talking about is how might we improve that particular plan that's on the table. And I would like to try to move us in that direction. And I'm willing to stay as long as anybody wants and talk when we're done. Thank you so much for tonight. And we'll see you next week, next month.